And we're continuing with the third chapter of The Witch in the Wood by T.H. White. The royal chamber was in the great tower of the castle above the salar. It was a round room which filled the entire barrel of the keep, except for the circular stairs leading to it, and these were themselves built into the tower walls. The two big windows lighted it well, showing the carpets which seemed to be its main furniture. These carpets were everywhere except on the floor. They were on the bed, which had been remade as a day bed, on the chest which the queen was sitting on, even on the table at which she was beginning to write. On the floor there were only rushes. The day bed had a canopy, also apparently made of carpet, and one side of the bed had a deep depression in it where King Lot slept. This depression was on the wall side of the bed. The king had won his side after a war of attrition lasting 7 years. He pointed out that when he slept on the room side of the bed, his depression always rolled him out. The queen's complaint was that she always rolled into the depression, but of course she would have done that whichever side it was. In his quarter of the room, there were a lot of boots and bits of armor strewn about. In hers, there were scents and greases, but this was not her main magic room where she did the makeup. Queen Morgause was writing to her sister, Morgan, in one corner to tell her the latest news, and King Lot was talking to Olbaz in a loud voice in another corner, hoping that the queen would hear what he was saying. The news was that the Duke of Cambrai had managed to gather together 5 more kings who were ready to fight against Arthur. These 5 kings were called Brandegoris of Strangor, Clariance of Northumberland, Idris of Cornwall, Crandalmas of North Wales, and Anguish of Ireland. It had been arranged that they were all to meet together with the kings who were already in revolt, making 11 in all, and then they were to fight a battle with King Arthur at a place called Bedegraine. Morgause was writing so that her sister could warn King Uriens to be there on the appointed day, but most of her letter was about Olbals and the difference in age between herself and Morgan, who was older, and other tactful topics which she was sure would be acceptable. King Lot was discussing the coming battle with Olbaz and explaining the whole business in loud, indignant tones. "My wife," he proclaimed, giving a peep at the witch to see if she was listening, "says that I am fighting Arthur on account of the Cornwall feud. You see, it does seem probable that Arthur's father really was King Uther Pendragon, and Uther Pendragon slew my wife's father, the Earl. But that isn't my reason at all. I'm not the sort of fellow to be ordered about by his wife." Here the king glared at Olbaz in an angry way. No, King Lot. No petticoat influence here. Oh, quite the reverse. I am fighting King Arthur as a matter of principle, Olbaz. A matter of principle. After all, what claim has he to be the King of England except this sword-pulling business? It is one's duty to one's country to keep up proper class distinctions. Nobody knows who the fellow's mother was. You can't have that sort of thing in the royal family. Oh, no, King Lot. So we 11 kings are going to depose him. Yes, King Lot. We shall start tomorrow. In the schoolroom, they had wandered far from arithmetic. "Who is this Arthur," asked Gawain, "that father is going to fight against?" "Mensah," began Sir Palomides pathetically. "Oh, bother Mensah. Let's do history and hear about Arthur." "Battles," complained Gareth. "Stick him in the guts," added Agravain. "Arthur," said Sir Palomides, "is king of Britishers, by Jove, sired by his late majesty, King Uther Pendragon, God bless, this bold boy, privately educated at castle of Sir Ector. On death of late royalty, no known heirs can be traced, but magic sword appears in stone, saying that he who pulls same out of stone is rightful son and king. All try such pullings, but none can effect same save Arthur. Whereupon, lowly, though thankful popular acclaim, said the boy to be king emperor, on whom son never sets. Question is, who was mother? Respected King Lot, dissatisfied by such doubts, revolts against honored potentate on grounds of misalliance, by Jingo." "What do you say by Jingo?" "The usage is idiomatic," replied the knight proudly. Personally, I think it is idiotic, said Agravain, mumbling a little in case of accidents, and the four of them dropped all their books with loud bangs, spilled some ink, shouted at the top of their voices, upset their stools, and vanished through the door, slamming it behind them. Sir Palomides knew by this that it was 4 o'clock. Where shall we go? Shouted Agravain in the distance. Go and pinch the saints. Go and bother the Furlbogs. Go and ask Mother Morland to tell us a story. Mother Morland's house was rather bigger than a large dog kennel, but it was extremely comfortable and full of interesting things. There were 2 horseshoes nailed on the door, 5 statues brought from pilgrims, with the used-up rosaries wound round them, beads break if you are a good prayer, several bunches of fairy flax laid on top of the salt box, some scapulars wound round the poker, 20 bottles of Mountain Dew, all empty but one, about a bushel of withered palm, relic of Palm Sundays for the past 70 years, and plenty of woolen thread for tying round the cow's tail when she was calving. There was also a large scythe blade, which the old lady hoped to use on a burglar, if ever one was foolish enough to come that way, and in the chimney there were hung some ash rungs, which her deceased husband had been intending to use for flails, together with eel skins, the strips of horse leather, as hangings on them. Under the eel skins was an enormous bottle of holy water, and in front of the turf fire sat one of the Irish saints, with a glass of water of life in his hand. He was a relapsed saint who had fallen into the Pelagian heresy of Celestius and believed that the soul was capable of its own salvation. He was busy saving it with Mother Morland. And the Usquebaugh. Hello, Mother Morland, said Gawain. We've come for a story, ma'am, about the Sidhe. God and Mary and Andrew to you, exclaimed the beldame. And you asking me for a story, whatever, with his reverence here among the ashes. Good evening, Saint Tollivac. Didn't notice you in the dark. The blessings of God on you. The same blessings to you yourself. It must be about murders, said Agravain. About murders and some corbies which peck out your eyes. No, said Gareth. It must be about a mysterious girl who marries a man because he has stolen a giant's magic horse. Glory be to God, remarked Sir Torlorvec. It's a strange story you're after wanting entirely. Come on, Sir Torlorvec. Tell us one yourself. Tell us about Ireland. Tell us about Queen Maeve who wanted the bull. Or dance us one of the jigs. Mercy on the poor bairns. To think of His Holiness dancing a jig. The 4 representatives of upper class sat down wherever they could. There were only 2 stools, and stared at the holy man in receptive silence. Is it a moral tale you're wanting? No morals. Palomides does all the morals. Now, said Gareth. No swearing, if you please. Everybody howled for Palomides like barbarians. Sir Palomides is very well, said Mother Morland. The creature. Okay, he only wants the baptism, if at all. Well, we don't like morals. We like a story about some fighting. Come on, Torellivac. What about the time you broke the bishop's head? Saint Torellivac drank a big gulp of his white whiskey and spat in the fire. There was a king in it one time, he said, and the whole audience made a rustling noise with their rumps, and they settled themselves for the authentic voice. There was a king in it one time, said Sir Torellivac, and this king, what do you think, was called King Conor MacNassa? He was a big whale of a man who lived with his relations at a place called Tara of the Kings. 'Twasn't long before this king had to go out to battle against them bloody O'Haras, and he got shot in the conflict with a magic ball. You are to understand that the ancient Irish were all after making themselves bullets out of the brains of their adversaries, which they would roll between the palms of their hands in little pieces and leave them to dry in the sun. I suppose they must have shot them out of the arquebus, you know, if they were quarrels. Now, well, anyway, this old king called Conor MacNassa was shot in the temples with one of them same bullets, and it lodging against the bone of his skull at the critical point entirely. I'm a fine man now, says King Conor, and he sends for the brehons and those to advise with him about the obstetrics. The first brehon, or whomever it was, says, "You're a dead man, King Conor. This ball is at the lobe of the brain." So said all the medical gentlemen without respect of person nor creed. "Oh, will I do it all?" cries the King of Ireland. "It's a hard fortune, evidently, when a man can't be fighting a little bit unless he comes to the end of his days." "None of your prate now," say the surgeons. "There's only one thing which can be done, and that same thing is to keep from all unnatural excitement from this time forward. For that matter, they says, you must keep from all natural excitement also, or otherwise the bullet will cause a rupture, and the rupture rising to a flux, and the flux to a conflammation, will occasion an absolute abruption in the vital functions at all. It's your only hope, King Conor, or otherwise you will lie compunctually as the worms made you. Well, begor, it was a fine state of business, as you can imagine. There was the poor Conor in his castle, and he not able to laugh, nor fight, nor take any small sup of spirited water, nor to look upon a white colleen anyhow, for fear that his brains would burst. The ball stood in his temples, half in, half out, and that was the sorrow with him from that day forward." "Poor king," said Gareth. "I suppose he could not even get in a temper with people, or run or jump or anything like that." "You may well say it. This Conor MacNassa was confined to a dark room where he could hear his kerns singing to the harp like angels, and soaking up the friendly drop, and slapping the castle gentlewomen in a merry way when they brought the creature to them, and perhaps cracking each other with a shillelagh sometimes, till the blood of envy was boiling in his veins. Yet he stood it all, you know, for the sake of what the doctors told him." "Where are the doctors?" said Mother Morland. "Hoots, but they're na canny." "Aye, then. 'Twas a sad world for King Conor, certainly, and him that did be in the forefront of the battle, before this cradle ball stuck in the portals of his mind." "What happened to him?" asked Gawain. "Did he live long in his dark room?" "What happened to him? I was now coming to that. One day there was a slashing thunderstorm in it, and the castle walls shook like a long net, and a great part of the bailey fell down upon them. It was the worst storm that was known in those parts of for a long whiles, and King Conor rashed out into the element to seek advice. He found one of his brehons standing there, whatever, and asked him what he could do. This brehon was a holy man, and told King Conor, he said, how our gracious Saviour had been hanged on a tree in Jewry that day, and how the storm was broken on account of it. And he spoke with King Conor about the words of God's Holy One, which had caused him to be nailed. Then what do you think King Conor of Ireland ran back to his golden palace for to seek his sword in righteous passion, and he ran out with it throughout the tempest and defend his Saviour, and that was how he died. He was dead? Yes. Well, what a lovely way to die, cried Gareth. It was no good, but it was grand. Agravain said, if I was told by my doctors to be careful, I would not lose my temper over nothing. I should think what was happening. But it was chivalrous, wasn't it? Gawain began to fidget with his toes. It was silly, he said eventually. It didn't do any good. But he was trying to do good. It wasn't for his own family, said Gawain. I don't know why he was so excited about it anyway. Of course it was his own family. It was for God. It was everybody's family. King Conor went out on the side of right and gave his life to help it. Very well, said Gawain. I think King Conor MacNassa was a good man then, if it was for his family. And that's the end of chapter 3.